Hey YouTube, what's going on? Snowflarky's Emos here today with another deck profile. Today I am bringing my Evol deck profile. Evols are the archetype of reptiles that become dinosaur monsters that become dragons. They're the archetype that introduced the very powerful Evolzar XZ monsters. And we pretty recently got some new support with them. I'm always a big fan of dinosaurs and I'm becoming more of a big fan of reptiles. So having a lot of these cards and seeing the new cards and also just having all the Evolzar XZs for other dino decks, just wanted me to, take a look and build them. So with that said, let's get into the cards. Starting with our monsters, I am playing 3 copies of Evotile Megachirilla. Megachirilla is one of our Evotiles, the reptile part of the deck that kind of gets everything started. It's a level 1, 0 attack, 0 defense. So it's got a great effect that you contribute a reptile monster that does include itself and discard 1 card to special summon a level 6 or lower fire dinosaur type monster from the deck. That is of course any of the Evolzar monsters themselves. So that's pretty cool. This guy just tutors out whichever one you need. Normally we want to go into Volcanosaur to make the XZs play. And then it also has an effect where when this card is in the graveyard, you can target a Dragon XZ monster you control that has no materials and attach up to 2 reptile and or dinosaur type monsters with different names from your hand and or graveyard to the monsters as material. So that's pretty nice. If you spent your Evolzar Lagia, your Evolzar Lars, your Dolka, you can put the materials back on it. Now do note that you can only use each effect of this card once per turn. That's perfectly fine. So, gets an Evolzar out of the deck, gives us a nice reload of materials, makes it a pretty good card. Next, I am playing 3 copies of Evotile Follis. This is one of the new Evotiles that we got pretty recently. If a monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy a dinosaur or reptile monster you control instead. Well, it's not destroy, it's actually tribute, which is pretty important because a lot of Evoltiles get the effects if they're tributed, or of course Evolzars get effects as well from that, so definitely can be pretty handy. But most importantly, when this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon 1 other Evotile monster from your hand, which is pretty sweet. And of course, that one can also come from the graveyard, and it's special summon in face down defense position, which means you can't use it for any XZs or not as easy to use as material, but you can still tribute it off for effects, which is pretty nice. And lastly, a great ability during the main phase, you can set 1 Evo Force or Evo Instant directly from your deck. Now, Evo Instant isn't too useful, but Evo Force is a pretty great spell card that we'll talk about later. And being able to set that once per turn is pretty nice because then that'll allow us to tribute our Evotile and get out any Evolzar from it. And for the last Evotile we are running, we got 3 copies of Evotile Yugioh here. Yugioh is a pretty simple Evoltile. If this card on the field is tributed, you can special summon an Evolzar monster from your deck. So that makes it the ideal target for you to special summon with Follis' effect, so that we can get Yugioh on the field, tribute it with the Evo Force that we're going to set from Follis as well, and that way we can get the effect to summon 1 off of Follis and the effect to summon 1 off of Yugioh, because that will trigger Yugioh's condition. And yeah, just a good of 3 card. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Evolzar Leos. And of course, this is a pretty good one. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can set an Evolutionary Bridge or an Evo Singularity. Again, Bridge isn't useful. Singularity definitely is, though, directly from your deck. Really good trap card that we'll talk about later. And then, of course, during your main phase, if you control this card that was normal or special summoned by the effect of a fire monster, you can send a fire, reptile, or dinosaur type monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can make 2 monsters on the field become the same level and type as that monster. So that's pretty nice. That means we can send a level 4 dino if we want to have the level 4 dinos to make Dolka or Lagia, or a level 6 dino if we want to make Lars or Solda, which is pretty sweet. And then of course you can actually only use each of this effect once per turn. So overall, pretty good card. Gets a Singularity, which can give us 1 more disruption on our opponent's turn. And of course, being able to make the levels and make the XZs is really good. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Evolzar Volcano. Pretty good for the classic Evolzars here. This one just has a pretty simple effect. When this card is special summoned by the effect of an Evotile monster, you can target an Evolzar monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And it cannot declare an attack this turn. So this is a level 4 Dino. We can use it to special summon any other level 4 Dino, like Evolzar Leos, or our Evolzar Diplo that I'll talk about next, and just makes it basically a 1-card XZ, which is pretty good. Once you've got an Evolzar in the grave, you definitely want to be pulling this guy out of the deck with his effects. And it doesn't even matter if you're special summoning another Evolzar Volcano. So definitely pretty works. Good card. We want to see it. Next up, I'm playing the one of Evolzar Diplo. This is another level 4 dinosaur type monster that we can pull out with our Evotile effects. When this card is special summoned by the effect of an Evotile monster, you can target a spell or trap that your opponent controls and destroy it. So that's pretty cool. If we need to pop a spell or trap when we revive our monster, we can just go for him. So send him when we need to do that. And, he's a level 4, so we can make Dolka or Lagia. And last for our monsters, I am playing 1 copy of Evolzar Elias. Has an effect that when this card is special summoned by the effect of an Evotile monster, you can special summon a level 6 or lower fire dinosaur type monster from your hand, which is pretty cool. Now we're not playing any other level 6s in here, so we can't naturally use this to summon another level 6 and make Lars or Solda. But we can use this with Leos to change its level, and most importantly, we can send this from the deck to the graveyard with Leos to make things level 6. And that just makes it good. We can make Lars, we can make Solda then. Overall, a pretty good card. And that is it for the monsters. Next up, we are talking about spell cards. Starting off, I am playing 3 copies of Piri Rise Map. Piri Rise Map is a spell card that says at the start of the main phase we can play this to add a monster with 0 attack from the deck to our hand and pay half our life points. Now, of course, we can't activate the effects of this card unless we normal summon it. So this is basically a searcher to grab us Mega Chirilla. Mega Chirilla is really important for getting things started, so it's always a good card to pull out with Piri Rise Map. Definitely worth playing. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Evo Diversity. Add an Evoltile or Evolzar monster from the deck to your hand, and you can only activate this card once per turn. So this can get us any Evoltile or Evolzar, so pretty much searches every monster in our deck, and it's just a pretty good card to get. Whichever one we're looking for, we can grab it with this. Next up, I'm running 3 copies of Fossil Dig. Fossil Dig, of course, is just a spell card that says we can add a level 6 or lower dinosaur type monster from our deck to our hand. So this can grab us any Evolzars that we want, namely Leos or Volcano or Diplo, which is pretty nice. We especially want to have this if we have Mega Chirilla, because we probably want to discard a dinosaur so that we can summon Volcanosaur and then special summon that dinosaur back. So Fossil Dig, of course, is also not a hard once per turn, which makes it a very good card. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Evo Force. Evo Force says we contribute an Evotile monster to special summon an Evolzar monster from our deck, and it is treated as being special summoned by the effect of an Evotile monster. So this is the card that Fallis lets us set. We can use this to tribute an Yugioh or Fallis or Mega Chirilla and just pull our Evolzar right out of the deck, get its effects going. And that's pretty nice. Being able to set this once per turn is awesome. This card is also not a hard once per turn, so multiple of these can go off multiple times. If you got 2 and you got Fallis and Yugioh, you can pull tons of Evolzars out of the deck and make a plethora of XZs. Next up, I'm running 2 copies of XYZ Import. I find this card to be a lot of fun in this deck. We can target an XZ monster we control, and a monster our opponent controls with attack that is less than or equal to our XZ's monster, and attach that monster to ours as material. This is incredibly good for both Lars and Dolka, who only need to detach 1 material to use their effects, and have an effect that can be used multiple times per turn. So we can easily just steal one of our opponent's monsters that isn't that crucial to negate to get an extra negate and disrupt the board further. And of course, we can only use this card once per turn. It's a quick play spell, so we can use it on our opponent's turn. Just makes it a pretty good card. And last for the spells, I am running 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. The way I've built this deck, I've jammed the extra deck with 3 copies of every Evol possible. So we can definitely banish some extra deck cards to get a draw 2 for the deck. Now, it does have a little anti-synergy with Piri Rise Map because both have to be activated at the start of main phase 1. So you can play Prosby in the spot, and it's actually probably good to slot a Prosby in over one of them at least. But getting that extra card can really do a lot in this deck. Can be the difference between making a whole other Evol XZ monster, which can be another 2 negates potentially. And, you know, 2 negates is just pretty huge. So definitely like playing this card. And that is it for the spells. Moving on to our trap cards, I am playing 3 copies of Evo Singularity. Evo Singularity is a great trap card for this deck that Leos allows us to set directly from the deck. We can target an Evoltile monster and an Evolzar monster in our graveyard and special summon one Evolzar XZ monster from our extra deck, and if we do, attach those 2 monsters to it as material. So this is pretty nice. This is an easy way to make any of our rank 6 Evolzars, which are not as easy to make. And all we got to do is have an Evotile and an Evolzar in the graveyard to do so, which is pretty easy to do. I mean, Mega Chirilla pretty much satisfies that condition. So, and this trap card just basically gets us another Evolzar, which is another 1 to 2 negates based on which one we go with. And even if we don't have the materials right off the bat, as soon as we burn materials for our Evolzar's effect, those materials will be in the graveyard. Then we can play Evo Singularity to get another one on the field, and just makes this deck extremely disruptive. Very good card. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment, of course, great counter trap. We pay half our life points to negate a summon or a spell or trap card activation. Just a trap card I like to help fill out the deck space, because having a Solemn Judgment on top of Evolzar negates is even more powerful. That 1 extra negate can just basically push the turn into blanking an opponent's entire turn, which is extremely powerful and protects us from certain situations. So definitely like having 3 of Solemn Judgment. And for the last card, I'm playing 1 copy of Heavy Stormduster. Worth considering bumping this up to 2, just mainly because when I play this deck, I'm playing against a group of folks who play decks that have a little more spell and trap cards in the back row. And this card is just really good for dealing with that. We can target up to 2 spells and traps our opponent controls and destroy them in exchange for our battle phase, which doesn't matter if we play it on our opponent's turn. And of course, that just makes it pretty good. You know, things like Labyrinth, Amazements, things that I see, you know, I just want to get rid of those spell and trap cards, and it's an easy way to do so. If you don't have to worry about back row decks with your group, of course, just side this out for any other card that you feel works. And that is it for the main deck. Next here, going into our extra deck, I am playing 3 copies of Evolzar Lagia. All the Evolzars you see are going to be at 3 copies in this deck. Lagia, of course, requires 2 level 4 dinosaur-type monsters. It's got 2400 attack. It's a dragon. All the Evolzars are dragons, because the evolution is reptile to dinosaur to dragon. And has a pretty simple effect. It's Solemn Judgment for, you know, detaching 2 materials. We can negate a normal or special summon or a spell and trap card activation and destroy that card. So 1 negate off this is pretty cool, especially if you can reload it on another turn, and that makes it pretty good. Next up, the main man, Evolzar Dolka. Incredibly powerful card, 2300 attack Evolzar that requires 2 level 4 dinosaurs. And of course, it says during either player's turn, when a monster effect is negated, you can detach 1 material to negate and destroy that card. So it's pretty nice. It's not once per turn. It's not once per chain. So you have 2 materials to negate 2 monster effects on this. And it's pretty nice to make early, because you can even play around some hand traps that they may be holding, you know, things like Nibiru, things like that. So this is definitely one you're going to be making often. A great one to use with XYZ import to put a monster on it and get another monster effect negation. Can just be extremely annoying for your opponent to deal with. Next is 3 copies of Evolzar Lars. This is the new one. Incredible monster, 2500 attack. It requires 2 level 6 monsters, which we can do by Leo sending Alias to the grave, or of course our Evo Singularity can make Lars. Now Lars has a great effect that while this card has material, your opponent cannot target it with monster effects, which is pretty nice. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can detach 2 materials from this to target a face-up card on the field and basically negate its effects. So you can negate the card that they play. But if all the materials attached to this are either reptile or dinosaurs, you can detach 1 instead. So that means in this deck, where everything we're going to have under it is a reptile or a dinosaur, it gets 2 negates, because again, not a once per turn. Uh, so that is pretty sweet. Makes it a very good card to make off of our Evo Singularity Trap card, which we're going to be setting from the deck pretty much every turn with Evolzar Leos. Next, I'm running 3 copies of Evolzar Solda. A lot of builds cut Soldas exclusively for Lars, but since I'm playing Pot of Extravagance, Solda is just another really good option to have in the deck. Solda, of course, requires 2 level 6 dinosaur-type monsters, while it cannot be destroyed by card effects while it has XZ material, so that's pretty cool. Can't Raigeki and get rid of this guy, which sometimes makes it worth running if you know your opponent's playing stuff like that. And when your opponent special summons a monster, except during the damage step, you can detach 1 material from this and destroy that monster. Again, not once per turn. We can destroy 2 special summon monsters per turn with Solda. 2600 attack means it's the highest attack monster as far as using XZ import. And this one works also really well with XZ's import because it's not like Lars where it needs specifically only dinosaurs and reptiles attached to it. And it's still worthwhile in this deck. Next up, for the last, I am playing 2 copies of the Transcendosaurus Drill. So the Transcendosaurus Drill is not really one I'm going to go into option, but it's something I can possibly make. It requires 2 level 6, which is, something that we can do with Leos. And it's a pretty interesting card that just is a, really strong monster. It's got 3000 attack, which is pretty nice, of course, higher than any of the other Evolzors. And of course, we can detach a material from this card to target a banished dinosaur type monster and special summon it. And then if this card is destroyed, you could shuffle a normal monster back in. Does not apply for this deck build. But yeah, it's not a card that will make often, but it's something we can make. And if we've banished everything else, not a bad idea. For our last monster, I am playing 1 copy of Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. I'd probably max out on this if I had 3 copies over the Transcendosaur, but Zeus is a good option. We're playing an XZ's deck here. So, of course, if we have an XZ's monster that attacks, we can just throw Zeus on top of it. And then, of course, Zeus just has the quick effect that during either player's turn, you can detach 2 materials from this card to send all other cards on the field to the graveyard. Just a really good disruption option to have to interrupt an opponent's turn and buy us 1 more turn. So if you got multiple copies of Zeus, definitely throw this in as the last card. And that's it for the extra deck. So that is it for my Evolzar deck profile. I've been having a lot of fun playing this deck, and for something that's such a cheap option, this card can create an insane amount of disruptions. It's pretty easy to basically end a board where I can get a guaranteed 4 or 5 disruptions between a Dolka, a Lars setup, a Lagia, and then of course being able to refuel that on the next turn means that if your opponent doesn't have the hand traps to stop this, you can easily blow a lot of decks out of the water with this, and it just is pretty cool. I love the Evolzar XZs. I like the reptiles and dinosaurs, and playing out the evolutionary bridge patterns is very fun. But I appreciate you all checking out the deck profile. Love to know what you're doing with Evolzors or what dino decks you may be playing. What have you put Evolzar Lars into? Appreciate you checking out the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.